Hello. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you all for coming by this evening. My name is Arney. I'm the artistic director here at the Geffen Playhouse, and I'd like to welcome you this evening to this function and thank the LA Stage Alliance for putting it together to discuss a little bit about artistic direction and what it is, and I'm going to pass that in just a minute to Terence. Thanks for coming by the Geffen, though. Welcome to the Audrey Skirball Kennis Theater here at the Geffen. It's a theater that seats anywhere from 99 to 150 seats. I was just saying this bank of seats here are permanent seats, and the booth is permanent, but everything else in the room is completely convertible. So you can do anything around or thrust or three-quarters. We're really proud of the space. We built it here in 2005. We had a renovation of the building. We had to be out of the building for about a year and a half. This was a little three-car parking lot back behind the theater where Gil Cates parked his car. And there was a set of dumpsters over here in the corner. And the theater is a historic building built in the late 20s by the Masons. They used to hold dances over here to attract UCLA kids over to dances and things. And so the Historic Society got involved, and they wouldn't let us build anything that would compete with that beautiful old building. But this building was far enough off the street that if you're out on the street, you don't even see it back here. It doesn't at all mar the front of the building. And we were able to put a three-story structure back here that's actually contemporary, that has this theater on the first level and dressing rooms and support spaces upstairs. So that's the Audrey. Thanks for coming this evening. Come back and see a show here. I'm happy to turn it over now to Terence McFarland, who is the CEO of the LA Stage Alliance and is going to be moderating this evening's panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Randy and everyone here at the Geffen for co-hosting us for LA Stage Talks. What is artistic direction, and how do you know when someone is doing it? We wouldn't be here without our sponsors, the Viller Family Foundation, the California Community Foundation, the Department of Cultural Affairs for the City of Los Angeles, James Irvine Foundation, LA County Arts Commission, Ralph M. Parsons Foundation, and the Schubert Foundation. If you'd like to sponsor LA Stage Alliance, contact me. I'm happy to add your name to that list. We will be doing surveys about this event, so when you leave, be sure to fill those out. We want to know how we're doing, how you like the event, what improvements you might suggest for us as we continue these throughout the series. This series came about for a number of different reasons. One, the staff and the board of LA Stage Alliance wanted to have a series of conversations that only we can pull together. Many individual companies do talkbacks with the artist on a specific production, but we realized that we could bring members from different organizations together to have conversations that are maybe a little bit higher, maybe sort of 30,000-foot view. Issues facing the sector, a little bit of kind of an educational outreach piece as well. The Ovation Rules Committee wanted to help educate voters on different aspects of production. So we hope that you enjoy this. Certainly give us your feedback so we can improve them as we go forward. This is, of course, a part of a series. We have one more event in the series. Your handout has information, but it will be Monday, July 9th. What am I hearing? The Aural Life of the Theater, which will be about music direction, composition, sound design, all things having to do with the ear. And it'll be co-hosted by the Colburn School at the Colburn School. We are live streaming today's event. Hello, online viewers. The first two videos of our first two talks are now available online. So if you go to lastagealliance.com/talks, you can see the archive of the first two events. And videos of this event and future will be available there as they become available and they're edited. And I want to thank Baker's Man Productions, who does a fantastic job of documenting and recording the events and helping us get them online. So a round of applause for Baker's Man. Being the 21st century, we are capturing questions and from Facebook and Twitter. If you're tweeting, please do tweet.
What's the hashtag?
Hashtag is LA Stage Talks. Thank you, Gina.
You were going to say that now.
Yeah, it was coming. I promise you that. As well as the live stream chat, Mark is moderating. So if you see him bringing questions to me, know that that's what that's doing. There's not an emergency happening backstage. Just to give you a heads up of what will be happening on stage. So with that, I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists for tonight. I'm going to try to do this in order, which isn't alphabetical. Mandi, who is a member of the Artistic and Management Committee at Theater of Note. Katharine, Nguyen, Artistic Director of Ghost Road Theater Company. Sachs, Co-Artistic Director of the Fountain Theater. Randall Arney, who has left the panel but will be joining us shortly.
He was unhappy.
He was very he was not happy with the hashtag. He's going to work that out. He'll be joining us in a moment. Nguyen, who is the Artistic Director of the Chance Theater, and Michael John Garces, Artistic Director at Cornerstone Theater Company. So with that, I want to dive right into the question at hand and ask each of you to define artistic direction as it relates to your work at your company now. And anyone can decide that. Michael?
Since I've been so collegially put on the spot. For my company, we're Cornerstone Theater Company's an ensemble. So we have an ensemble of 17 artists, which we define fairly broadly. So we have actors and designers and directors, writers in the ensemble. We also have some of our staff members. We have a community engagement person in our ensemble. So it's 17 people. We make our decisions by consensus. Make the large artistic decisions for the company in a consensus process, which means nothing happens unless we all consent. But I also am the leader of the staff. And so my job essentially is to sort of get all these disparate voices in the company together, and also from people external to the company who have stake in the company together, think about that, sort of synthesize that into a vision, and craft that into a vision that I also believe in, and sort of hone it, and then sort of sell it back to the ensemble to come to our decisions, and then manifest that vision in the work that we do, so that there's a strong artistic voice moving through. So I would say that it's to sort of lead our company and keep it on mission and do work that both serves that mission and tells a strong story and fulfills the vision of the company.
Randy?
I'm sorry, here at the Geffen, I consider myself kind of a curator of an artistic museum of theatrical fare, I guess. The idea being, as a not-for-profit, part of our mission is completely an artistic mission. And so over the course of, in the 2 theaters that we program, we have 5 shows in there, 3 shows in here. We try to build a season that is well-rounded. We have about 10,000 subscribers, season ticket holders, and we try to build a season that has a variety of things for a variety of people. We take great pride in our new plays programming, the creation of new work. We believe very much that not only do we want to be users at the theatrical table, but we like giving back and making deposits as well as withdrawals. So we love creating and adding to the canon of theatrical literature. It is predominantly my taste and vision, but like a curator in a museum, you can't expect it to like every painting on the wall. And this is what I try to tell a patron whenever they call with complaints: is do you call the museum owner and complain about what you may or may not like all of the fare at the museum. Hopefully it is provocative. Hopefully it creates conversation with our audience. Our first, and I would say for all of us here, if you pull back far enough, we have a variety of artistic directors here in a variety of theaters, but if you pull back far enough, we are all there to tell stories to our local audience, to tell theatrical stories to our local audience. We all come at it in different ways. We all choose our product in different ways, but ultimately it's about the community too. It's about Los Angeles, and it's about this big feedback loop that gets established between a play and an audience, and over the course of a season between a theater and an audience. And hopefully, with what we do, we are enlightening and educating and entertaining.
I'm in a unique position at the Fountain Theater because I'm not only the co-artistic director, but I'm also the co-founder. So I helped start the company with Deborah Lawler back in 1990, 22 years ago. I can't believe it. So I'm clear about what my function is at the theater and what the mission of the Fountain Theater is, and that's to develop new work and present plays that reflect the cultural diversity of Los Angeles. And that's what we're all about, to develop new work, either pieces that we create ourselves or our Los Angeles or West Coast or US premieres. And I see that's the primary purpose of my job, is to reach out to artists either in Los Angeles or around the country and to develop new plays that reflect the diversity of this amazing metropolis that we live in. I mean, our current season now is a reflection of that. In this calendar year alone, we began with the West Coast premiere of a new play by a Latina playwright, serving the Hispanic community and our Hispanic audiences. We now have the world premiere of a new play that is in sign language and spoken word, which is serving the deaf community as well as hearing audiences. Coming up next, we have the LA premiere of a new play, which is serving African American community. So that's what we're about at the theater and the kind of work that I do, and I feel it's my job to make sure that it happens.
The Ghost Road Company is a small ensemble of 7 people, and the work that we do is all collaboratively created. Everything is original, and we don't have a season because it takes anywhere from 8 months to 2 years to create a piece of theater. Our specific goal is to take inspiration, whether it's images, whether it's literature, whether it's a classic play, and to take it apart and see what's relevant to a contemporary society within this particular piece, using different methods to create the work, from writing to improvisation to physical theater to clowning to whatever is going to best tell that story. My job as the artistic director in this case, I'm also a founder. The other 2 left me. But I don't know why. Our point of view is constantly to try to push the envelope. We're also interested in the community of Los Angeles, but I would say that our main focus is the work and to continually experiment with the work. For us, process is much more interesting and much more of what we're interested in exploring than actually the product. Granted, we do have a product at the end of the day, but the exploration is really what's key for us. And we try to invite our audience into that. So we are constantly, it's about the experiment for us. And trying to keep on task with that. That's right.
Theater Note is a little bit different, a little bit similar to Cornerstone. It's we've got about 100 members, and we are actually, I'm one of 5 people on the committee that serves as the artistic committee. So all 5 of us are making our primary overarching job of the year. The big number 8 job is to choose the season going forward. We serve in a 2-year term, so we pick what shows are coming up for the next season. But we're directed by the company. We do a whole week of readings of plays. The members curate plays, and everybody kind of comes together and reads and listens and votes. And we take the vote in from all the members, and then we kind of assess who's interested in what plays, what percentage of people are interested in what plays, which ones have support, which ones do people just do not want. And then we kind of have to mull all of that over, taking in all of the other external kind of situations of looking at the bigger picture of well, we can't have 2 plays like this in this season, that would probably not be good, or we just did a play like this last season. So trying to kind of move all the pieces around while targeting specifically, we look for new works. At the very least, we try to do West Coast premiere, although world premieres are what we are really interested in doing, and developing plays either from our own company members or other artists. That we have a workshop series that we develop them. So every time that we're able to kind of send something through the workshop series in particular and get it up on our stage, it excites us even more. So we're really looking for the production of new works to be premiering in LA and honoring all the amazing artists that we have here. So.
I'm not going to call on you, and I'm going to ask that you raise the overall volume level a little bit for our online audience. Okay, all right. We are also ensemble driven. and I'm also a co-founder. We're somewhere in between. We're artist-driven, and we have 4 full-time staff members who are artists first, do all these other jobs, and all our company is around, including associate artists, around 25. Everyone has a say in the season selection, but they depend on me to take the lead and to bring many of the plays to the table. Mostly, I think my job is, I guess, being a servant. I feel like we started the company very small. We're still very small. Our budget's only $400,000. So if that does not pay full staff, we always joke that the guy in and out makes more money than all of us. And so, but yeah, so it feels like there's an investment from the artists that I work with. There's an investment from our community, from our board, and from our audience. And I just feel like my daily mantra is sort of like, how do I fulfill those investments? So some of you have touched on this a little bit, but if you can walk us through the specific selection of a production or a season and how you interact with the rest of the team, be it the artistic team or the administrative team or board of directors, if they get involved in that process. So kind of walk us through individual show, project, or season selection.
Well, since I started to kind of address that, like I said, we do 10 days of play readings at the beginning of the year. Members get to curate plays that they're passionate about, and then, you know, the AMC, which is the Artistic Management Committee, we try to make it to every single one of them, and and see what the plays that the company is really so driven for that they're going to curate the readings for. And so we take all of those in, and like I said, we do a straw poll at the end, kind of unscientific voting of everything. And we take all of those in, and actually this year, David, who's over there, who's on the AMC with me as well, made a fabulous math, kind of statistical analysis of all of the data, which I thought was even more helpful than looking at it last year, to be able to see, okay, we had 10 people vote for this, but there was versus one person that didn't, versus 25 people that liked this, but still 17 people didn't. So trying to get an idea of all of the math behind it, and looking at the bigger picture of like I said, what we put in last season, what we've had in recent seasons, what seems to have kind of something that's going to be really provocative and revelatory, and speak to. We're always trying to define what is very note. We always try to say, oh, that's a very note show, and we're like, well, what does that mean? We're not really sure what that actually tangibly means. It's kind of a sense that everybody has of it, and you can't really pin down. So we try to go for what feels like a very note show, and do something that we think will really excite not only our ensemble, but will excite the audiences that comes here.
And does the administrative staff play into that as well, sort of the budgeting process, or sort of the realities of production beyond just the artistic piece of it?
Yes.
You can talk to that a little.
Yeah, in the end, we do submit when we've hashed it all out and figured it all out, and sometimes gone back to plays that we haven't read in a couple years and looked at. We then do submit it to the board of directors, and they kind of take a look at it and say, maybe, are you crazy? You can't have 25 people in the cast. We can't, do that financially, or this set would be, whatever. So they kind of, we luckily, at least on our committee, have been, I think, pretty mindful to, this is something that we can't possibly do again, or do we really want to put 3 people in the show again, like we did this past year, or do we, try to really balance the needs of our ensemble, because, we have around 100 members, about 60 that are active. And they're all, not all, but the primary members are actors. We've got some tech members, and we've got some writers and directors, but primarily actors. And so, we've got to really look at what's going to be able to involve most of our company. We don't want to overly target any areas, and we really try to be very diverse, and pick shows that actually have either an incredibly open cast, or are very specific, that we know would serve our company really well. So one or the other.
On. Well, the company will propose projects for all of us to read. I have a literary manager, now, starting this year, and an associate artistic director, and we have directors that we work closely with that are part of the conversation. And then we apply for a lot of things and get turned down for most of them. And then apply for shows, you know, for plays, for grants, or apply to get just to get the rights to do these plays and musicals, and get turned down quite a bit. So a lot of times this season are things that we've been applying for, like last year's production of Jerry Springer of the Opera. We applied for that for 4 years in a row before we actually got the rights to do it. And usually apply is also about writing them and convincing them why this small theater, this 49-seat theater in Orange County should get to do this show, you know. So it becomes about campaigning for that. And so, you know, and then we look at the season and hope it's something that everyone is passionate about, and hope it's provocative enough work that we can be proud of.
I can talk about the producing of a new play or the development of a new work, which is the most fun to do. At the Fountain, when a new play is developed at our theater, sometimes a playwright has a director that they have a relationship with, that they've already paired up with, that they have some kind of a collaborative long-term relationship with, and so they come as a package and we work together with a director. Or if a new play does not have a director, then it's my job to help find a director that is a good match for this kind of work. I feel that my job as an artistic director working on a new play is to kind of echo what Randy said, is to support and to nurture and see that the story that the playwright is intending to tell is told in the most dramatic and artistically satisfying way, and to make sure that everybody is on the same page creatively, artistically, that we're all telling the same story. That's obviously also the job of a director, but also as the artistic director, you're sort of a producer, but also the overall kind of creative eye to make sure that the entire team posse is moving in the correct direction, and to support and to create an environment in your space, at your home, in your creative home, where these artists can play. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do as artistic directors, is to provide a creative home that is open and fun and nurturing and supportive, so that the art can flourish, can grow in the most unimpeded way. So my job is to help put the design team together, if they don't have actors in mind, to help with the casting, lighting, set, the whole design team, and then to help kind of steward the production artistically, coming in and taking notes and dramaturgical notes or directorial notes, and to help the artists, you know, any way I can. But again, I think the most important thing that I can do is to provide a creative home, you know, where art can be creative.
Yeah, I take a very similar tack. Here at the Geffen, we have a literary office, and that is staffed by two, and we keep our fingers very much on the pulse of the writing that's going on all over the country, and in fact, the world in some cases. We try very much to stay in tune with what's going on and not only in New York and in Chicago and Minneapolis and all the different places where good work is being created. But not unlike what I'm hearing here, I cut my teeth. I grew up in Chicago theater, and I was the artistic director there for several years of the Steppenwolf Theater Company. And not unlike you guys, your best work is when you follow artists' passion to the work. And in Chicago, I had a collective of artists, not unlike some of you guys. And in some ways, the artistic director's job there is the care and feeding of this group of artists. And play selection, oftentimes our play choice followed ensemble interest and availability. What do you want to do? When do you want to do it? And that's how we ended up picking our plays. And again, it was following those artists. So I have fewer artists in-house here, but I consider all of them still my friends and colleagues. And in fact, I have even a greater network and friends of colleagues, people who are out there acting and directing, people that I respect their work, and I'm constantly in touch with them about what they're up to, about what excites them, about what they want to do. So I kind of think of my job here as moving from this ensemble of 30 in Chicago to a much, much greater ensemble, but the work in some ways that is the best is always following some set of artists' passion to a work. As Stephen said, sometimes it's a playwright, sometimes it's a playwright and a director, sometimes it's an actor who's been working with a playwright, sometimes, and so even though many artistic directors, go into their office and close the door, and it's a lonely kind of, this season I'll do a season of expressionism, and then they come out and do that, and I could never do that. So we very much, both in our literary office as well as in my office, stay in touch with artists that are exciting us, and as Steve said, our best thing we can do is provide the playground, because in this town it's great for us, for an audience member to go away saying, wow, that is the coolest place to go see a play, and I had such a great time seeing a play there, and it was provocative and I learned something. But I also like sending the artists into their community saying, wow, I don't get to do many plays, but when I do, that's a great place to do one. So we're kind of working both sides of the footlights, trying to excite both sides of that artistic interaction, both you guys on that side and the directors, writers, designers, and actors on this side of the footlights.
Yeah, you want to create an environment where they can do their best work, where artists can do the best work possible.
And a lot of times, play selection is like capturing lightning in a bottle. You're doing a play now because this artist was available now, and the play happened to be now, and so a lot of times the building of a season, you are looking at things that are multi and varied in their taste, to give the talent, to give the audience a wide range of tastes over the course of a season. But a lot of times in creating those events, it's truly capturing availability of a project, of a play, something in the world makes this play speak particularly resonantly right now, and boy, we knew about it last year, but it wasn't nearly as exciting as it is now because the world has kind of caught up with it. And so there's a lot of different reasons why plays happen sort of when they do. Some is as crazy as just artist availability, but again, you're kind of capturing something and trying to stop it all so that by the time you come out with a season, it's populated with people who want to do it.
And actually, I should say our selection actually even starts far earlier than our play reading, the 10 days of play readings, because we have a play selection committee of people who, one person who kind of heads it up and reaches out to a lot of artists and and playwrights and gets a ton of plays, and there's a whole system of sending them to the committee to read, where they review them and vote. And if the three people, all three people are like, no way, or one of the three people is like, only the one like, yeah, I like this, it doesn't go past that. So it's got to get through at least two of those three people, and then it's got to go to, we have our PSC nights, where it gets read out loud, and it has to have the majority of the vote in the room as well, and then it gets to put in our hopper so it can be read at our week long. So it starts, some of our plays have been on a journey, just in the company for sometimes up to 2 years before it even makes it onto the stage, or if they go through the workshop series, because we decided it just needed a little more, it's almost there, but it's not quite, we want to see some changes, we put it into the workshop series. So there's, that they can have quite a life, and a lot of company members have had hands on it before it even gets to the decision-making process.
We try to make as many decisions as we can by consensus, and
Hope that doesn't happen every night. I don't know what that is.
I had no idea this was going on.
Goodness, I gotta come to the theater.
It'd be a bummer if someone was paying for this. And so what happens with us is often it's me, and recently other company members have started taking the lead on pieces. Someone will come to the ensemble with an idea or a piece or several things. They'll come, they'll go, this is what I'm interested in. And they will come with a lot of research, with a lot of images, with having done a ton of homework. And they'll come here, plop this giant tome in front of us, or me or whoever, and say, this is what I'm interested in. And we'll have a long discussion about it. And if it resonates with everybody, if everybody feels, we're talking about 7 people here, so if everyone feels a personal connection and feels that it's relevant, then we'll start the workshop process with that particular piece, with that particular person heading it up. What's very challenging about working in this fashion is that you have a lot of very creative, brilliant minds coming at one piece, and everyone has a point of view. The job of the person, whether it's me or somebody else, or ultimately me, if it gets out of hand, is to try to keep the vision focused. So that's how we work. We don't pick a season, we don't pick a play, we don't, we may pick, we did the Oresteia a little while ago, and so that was a play, but it wasn't Oresteia when it was done. So, when it was performed. So that's what we do. We come at it from a completely backwards way. And so these are the ideas. What do you think? Does it resonate? Sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't resonate, the thing goes out the window. There's nobody forces, I'm not going to force a piece on a group of people. Everyone has to be excited about it. And then we go from there and start the entire development process from there.
Yeah, not somewhat similarly to this road. We don't choose plays in our process at all. For those of you who don't know, Cornerstone is a community engaged theater company. So we create plays in residence with the given community. And so a lot of our conversation on the ensemble level has to do with what our interests and curiosities and excitement might be about what communities we want to collaborate with. And then we have a whole process of approaching folks in the community and seeing if any sparks fly, and we can actually make some partnerships and start a process. So on that end, we have a whole community engagement process that we're doing, and once that's at a certain stage and we feel fairly committed to the project and like it's going to happen, we have conversations about what artists, what team we want to put together to do this process, and what kind of process we might want to have. So it also involves with the ensemble a lot of conversation about possibly guest artists we might want to bring in, guest writers, etc., to lead the project or be in one of those lead seats, the writer or director seat, or whether it's an ensemble artist. And a lot of my job as artistic director is to sort of guide that conversation and also passionately advocate for artists I think are a good match to that particular project for whatever reason. And sort of once we choose, say, a playwright, then advocate for a particular director or vice versa. And so once we put a team in place, that team really has a lot of autonomy, at least in terms of the ensemble, and starts moving forward. And the writer, we have a lot of what we call story circles, and so a lot of my job is to make sure that our process is going forward the way it should be going, that we're providing all the support we can to a creative team, bringing people together for what we call story circles, or individual meetings, interviews, other kind of engagements with the community. So the playwright is essentially gathering as much material as possible to write her or his play. And I'm often in dialogue a lot with that playwright and director about how that's shaping up and what kind of play seems to be emerging, whether the playwright is inspired to adapt either very closely or far afield from a source text, or write a new play and what shape that play might be taking. And then as that play gets written, I do the artistic director job of responding to that play, providing, giving notes and things like that, its response to the writers, as well as providing context for other company members to hear the play and share their response. And then we also have readings within the community, so community members can share their response. We try to create context in which those conversations can happen in ways that people feel free to express, but the playwright isn't, battered to death. And so I sort of guide that process. And a big part of my job is sort of making sure that, on one hand, community needs and concerns are being addressed, and that there's real dialogue and constant flow, and that we don't ever, we really keep everybody at the table as best we can, and at the same time advocating strongly for artistic and aesthetic rigor, and not compromising the way that has a detrimental effect to the final product of the play. Essential to our aesthetic is having non-professionals and professionals on stage together. So non-professionals from the community as well as our professional actors from our ensemble and guest artists. So it's then working with the director to find a balance a performance balance that makes sense in that play. So I sort of oversee that whole process as artistic director. Our board has no say in what we do in terms of our art. I'm sure they'll be happy to hear that. Except at the end of the year when they ask me, why we spent so much money on X or Y, and you're fired if it didn't work out. But I work closely with our managing director as decisions get made on the process. Say, hey, this is turning into a musical, so what are we going to do about that? And strategizing with her to make sure we're, making these decisions far in advance, or going back to the team and saying, let's scale down what we mean by musical. So I'm constant balancing that. And since during about a 2-year process, the play is unfolding, it's a real balancing act, because we don't actually know what we're fundraising for exactly far enough in advance to necessarily be ready for everything that the creative team throws at us, but we really do try to help them actualize whatever they decide to do.
Great. So we spent a little bit of time finding out kind of what is the job of the artistic director. I'd love to hear each of you say, what isn't your job? When you could say, no, that's not my job, that's somebody else's job.
I don't build things. That's really it.
Accounting. I don't do that.
Well, we're a small enough organization at the Fountain where I don't have the luxury to say no to anything. So I say yes. I say yes.
Yes, and you do it all.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, with all the 5 of us, there is somebody that is the liaison for the finance. We basically act as production manager as well, which is, it's always kind of interesting. So there's a lot. Mostly it's like, but it actually has to deal with the actual building, maybe the rent. That's about it. It's just like, oh, that's the one thing we don't have to do.
I have to say, I'm very lucky in that I really do get to deal mostly with the art, because I work with Mark Seldes, and he's the producing director, and he does all that publicity stuff. He doesn't build things either, but he does. He keeps everything afloat, and it's a great partnership. It would be very difficult otherwise, because I'm not very organized. So.
Michael, you brought up the board of directors. If you can kind of touch on your relationship with your board and to what degree they're involved in the process from artistic point of view, but also kind of administratively, kind of what kind of questions are coming from them around your work.
Well, we're pretty clear. We have a great board. I'm happy to say, and certainly when I talk to a lot of friends and colleagues from around the city and the country working at not-for-profits or theaters and other organizations, boards can be a struggle sometimes, both maintaining a board, keeping a board active but not too active, in terms of micromanaging and things like that. And having a healthy relationship with the board can be a struggle, a board that supports the company. And we've been fantastically blessed in the time I've been at Cornerstone. And I say that because one of the things that I think we've been good at, and the board's been pretty self-policing with, is really being very focused on what the board is there to do and what it's not there to do. And the board is there to sort of make sure we're staying on mission and act as sort of as, they're members of the public. We get certain benefits by being a not-for-profit granted by the government, so we can fulfill our mission. And so their job is A, to make sure we're staying on mission. And so if they feel that we are somehow, if we start, doing a commercial production or something, they might question, our motives and why our company would do that given our mission. And they're pretty good about that. And then they're there to provide quote, fiscal oversight. We have monthly meetings with our budget and finance committee, and they do ask pretty probing questions about why we made X or Y decisions, why this is going. See, we're spending more here, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're answerable to them. And then to provide financial support for the company, which are also quite good about in terms of helping us strategize, their own personal support, et cetera, et cetera. And that is their job. And we're pretty clear about that. So as individuals, they certainly do occasionally call me and complain about a show, and about X or Y, and that's great. But on a board level, they're actually pretty good about not not as a board member or as a board, getting involved in that. And our managing director does a good job of being really articulate about that as new board members come on and on an ongoing basis, and working with the board chair to make sure that that happens. So that creates, for me as artistic director, a really healthy relationship with the board. So I have, I sort of let people know what's going on and solicit advice from individuals and things like that, but we're very clear in the roles, which is great, because it can get complicated, I think, and mucky. And in terms of what we don't or do, the organization has sort of expanded and contracted and expanded since I've been at Cornerstone, depending on how we're doing and how the world is doing in terms of the economy and things like that. And I get to say no to things that I'm able to raise money, and my partner is able to raise money to hire other people to do. I think I find some of my delegation is really key. If you're not a good delegator, you're not going to say no to anything. I think in order to sort of co-power whatever your staff, really giving them something to do and then really saying, no, I'm not going to take responsibility for that, is both hard, because then people make mistakes. Perhaps you could argue, at least you feel that you wouldn't have made, but I think it makes the organization stronger. And so I actually try to say no to quite a few things. I don't do a lot of the day-to-day communication stuff. I really try to stay out of it. I'm pretty clear about I need to see the stuff before it goes out, but I really expect them to put it together before I see it. That kind of thing, as opposed to being really active in it.
Are there differences in your relationships with boards of directors? Randy, I would imagine your board is much different than most of the folks in the panel.
Yes, we have a very good board here, as you know. Gil Cates, our founder, put the board together. Gil founded the theater in 1996, I want to say. And so the original board were a lot of Gil's buddies, and which was great, because what he needed was what all of us need from a board, which is someone who's there to have your back, basically, and to believe in what it is you do out there, and to stay out of your way otherwise. And so Gil did a very good job of creating a group of supporters on board who understand that really for a theater this size, their prime job is fundraising, is bringing needed support. The income falls in two levels. There's the earned income, which are the tickets that you sell, and the unearned income, which needs to be raised by a staff and with help from a board. And so this board, as I say, they got a very good lesson from Gil when he got started, as you said, as to what board definition is. And they don't enter into the artistic decisions here at all. All that is done, as you said, at the end of the year. They can decide if they like it or not and keep it going. But they don't get into the artistic at all. You mentioned a managing director. That's a key relationship in every theater, is a relationship between an artistic director and a managing director. And especially when you've grown to a theater kind of our size, it's really important that you have a managing director that understands artistic risk. And it's also important that you have an artistic director who understands fiscal responsibility. It really does take both. And we found early on at Steppenwolf, you buy your artistic risk. As long as you balance your budget at the end of the year, they don't get to come in and tell you a thing about what you do on stage. And so in a way, it's through your sort of fiscal discipline that you're able to really buy the ability to do about anything you want, to setting those parameters. I know there are artists who get out of here, don't tell me about money, I'm going to spend everything. And again, that really isn't, and as an artistic director, part of that responsibility is striking the balance between artistic risk and fiscal responsibility. But for all of you, again, through my 2 experiences here in Chicago, a board of directors truly grows with your ensemble, with your company, and is what you need now. The Steppenwolf's first board, they were out of college, and it was like their parents, because they needed furniture from their porches and from their houses for the sets. And so the first board were kind of some parents, and then started to sell a few tickets and you needed somebody, you needed a lawyer on your board. And so you add a lawyer because you got successful enough that you need to write a contract or two. And then you all of a sudden need somebody who understands how, banking. So you got a banker on your board because you've made enough money that you need to store it somewhere. You need to make a payroll or something. So
Get a CPA to do the
you get a CPA. And so literally your board kind of grows, if it does so organically, at a pace that is exactly what you as a theater needs at any given time. So they kind of grow up with you. And as Michael said, it can get ugly if they kind of don't understand boundaries and don't understand that the best way to support a theater is by let that art do whatever it does. And you trust that they're here to begin with because something you're doing's turned them on stage or in the work. And so you just keep tapping into that with them. But staffs truly, you said as an artistic director of a small company, you do it all. Your staff is truly that. As an artistic director, most of these guys are founders. They started something by themselves with a vision, and as they got too much to do, they had to get somebody else to do some of this over here, and get somebody else to do some of this over here, and pretty soon you've got a staff that's 3 or 4 people, and then 10 or 12 people, and that's the way a board grows, and that's the way that's the way theaters grow. But it really kind of takes, it's a 3-legged stool. It's an artistic impulse, and it's a staff, and it's a good solid board who takes care of you in lean times. By the same token, as Michael said, there was a point, harking back to Steppenwolf's history, where Steppenwolf did a kind of by accident. The company wanted to move to a slightly bigger theater, been operating in the basement of a church, and they wanted a 115-seat theater, and the board said, okay, let's do it. And at some point, very close to the time of the move, the board got cold feet and said, this is not something that can be done, and you've got to stay in your basement of the church. And the ensemble asked for the resignation of the entire board of directors and kept the 3 or 4 that supported the move and built a new board of directors with new friends. And that was kind of an accidental time where the artistic impulse of that theater staked out a line in the sand that was kind of by accident in that company's history, but it really set a precedent that for boards going forward as to who it is carries the kind of artistic torch.
To spin off that idea, this idea of sort of transition, for the 3 of you who were not founding artistic directors of your company, can you talk about the process? What kinds of, how does one choose a successor in an artistic director position? So if Mandi, Randy, and Michael can talk about that process, what kind of questions get asked, who's involved in the process, and how that went?
Ours is every December, the company meeting in December, we take elections, people get nominated the meeting before, and we actually have whoever is nominated and accepts the nomination for the AMC, they get to stand up in front of the company and say, this is why I feel that I would be an asset to the company in this role, and the company gets to ask them whatever questions they want to ask, and then they go outside and everybody kind of has a discussion. And sometimes they're very clear and very like everyone's on board, like yes, yes, yes. And I've been in some that were contentious and it's like I do not want this person representing me. All kinds of arguments, and it's really great. Everyone's got that opportunity to have their say of which members of the company and why they do or do not want them to represent them. Because ours, it's a 2-year term, but we switch out every year. So there's the 3 people and then 2 people and the alternate that would come on, and then the next year the 2 people and the alternate stay, and you vote in 3 new people, so that there's always 1 year of institutional knowledge. So you're not coming in January completely blindsided and like I don't know what to do. But in that, even with that 2 years, there's still a lot of things that we always feel like how did we not know that this was how that went? I've been a member of the company since 2005, and there were still things where I was like, how did I miss that? And in joining, and sometimes it's it's a matter of like who you serve with and how leaning on the company for a lot of information. That's our process.
I started here in December of '99. As I said, Gail Kate started the theater in 1996, and it was kind of an accident of my working here. I actually had directed the last play in this space when it was the Westwood Playhouse. That was a play called Picasso with the La Pen Agile, written by Steve Martin, and I had done that show first in Chicago. That's where we created the show, and Steve Martin, who happened to be on the board of LACMA, said, "I'd love to do that play in Los Angeles because there's a Picasso exhibit going on at the," and so we came out and looked at theaters, and we rented the Westwood Playhouse. And so I would come here, ran 10 months here, and I was the artistic director at Steppenwolf in Chicago. I would come out to visit my cast here, come out to replace an actor or something, and I started meeting this guy, Gil Cates, in the lobby, who had been tapped to start the Geffen Playhouse. Gil had been the dean across the street of the theater, Department of Film, Theater, and Television. Interestingly, the people who had run this as a theater, an older couple who had a furniture store, and they sold furniture in the lobby. They would literally, from the 70s until they would sell furniture in the lobby, do plays in the theater, try to pick plays with at least 2 intermissions so they could sell more furniture.
I remember you used to have to walk through the furniture store to get to the space.
Truly, there was a little card thing where if you liked a piece of Swedish furniture, you could put your card in there and they would call you the next day.
That's right.
So their first gig was selling furniture, and they sort of, did plays and then sold furniture at intermission.
Yeah.
So they were the ones who renovated it after the Masons and turned it into a theater by building a riser in there. Well, bless their hearts, when the older gentleman died and the woman, Kirsten Coombs, who still is on our board, wanted to sell the theater, she was afraid that someone was going to turn this into a strip mall or a restaurant or something else in Westwood. And she was not going to sell the theater unless somebody could guarantee her that it would remain a theater. Well, UCLA will be here in 100 years. So Gil Cates, as the dean, made a deal so that this woman got a 100-year guarantee that this building will be a theater. And that's how she sold it to UCLA, and the Geffen Playhouse now rents the actual building from UCLA, and we have programs with UCLA over there. So I had done Picasso with the La Pen Agile here. Gil was forming this theater. He would talk to me in the lobby, what's a board of directors, because he'd worked in for-profit stuff, and I was doing not-for-profit in Chicago, and he would ask me about things about a not-for-profit. Little did I know that I would ever even be moving to Los Angeles later. And so, flash forward 3 or 4 years, I had passed the artistic director duties on to somebody else at Steppenwolf. At Steppenwolf, we always insist that one of us in the ensemble is in the job. And that keeps the power in the company, but it usually means that someone's doing the job who might rather be acting or directing. So we end up passing that job around a little bit every few years. So I had passed the artistic director duties on to my successor there, a woman named Martha Levy, had come out here, was acting and directing. I went back to Steppenwolf, directed a play. It went really well, The Beauty Queen of Lebanon. Had my buddy Laurie Metcalf in it.
Oh.
Laurie said, God, I live in LA, do you think we could do this in Los Angeles? I said, well, I don't know, but I know this guy who started a theater. I'll call him and see if he might like the play. So I called Gil, and he said, no, we just did Cripple of Inishmaan. I don't have any interest in that play. But I am kind of interested in an artistic partner. Do you have any interest in that? And I said, no, I've done that in Chicago. I really don't think I have any interest in that. He said, well, how about a lunch? And as I've told the story before, I was an actor. Lunch sounded pretty good. So I went to lunch, and it was literally over probably 6 or 8 months that Gil and I had a series of lunches talking about the theater, talking about his dream for the theater, talking about his wanting to renovate the theater, talking about what he wanted to do on the west side of Los Angeles to light up a provocative, cutting-edge theater for West LA. I knew that many of my friends had relocated here from Chicago, and they would love to do a play and sleep in their own bed at night. And I knew that's true of every other great city in America. Some of their best talent finds their way here, and they're all still theater rats. And all of them, even though they're out here to do film and television, are interested in the same kind of thing. So it was literally a series of 6 months, Terence, a long way to get to your answer, that Gil truly, I think, got a sense of who I was, and I got a sense of who he was, and how I might function as an artistic director, and literally it was 6 to 8 months of lunches that we kind of convinced each other that this was the right idea. And by then, it kind of felt like I'd always been here somehow. And so whatever he found out in that 6 or 8 months, I guess was okay with him.
My process was a little different. Cornerstone was founded in '86 by Bill Rausch, who was the artistic director for 20 years. And he came to a point in his life and journey where he decided he was going to move on, and he went through a whole process. He went on sabbatical for a year, came back, announced to the company, and they went through like a 2-year process, the ensemble, talking about what they should do if the company should indeed continue to exist, or if they should sort of close their doors. And they came to the conclusion that they should exist, and then they started a process. And it was essentially, they hired a firm to sort of manage and implement a process for them in finding a new artistic director. So, I was living in New York at the time. I lived in New York for about 16 years, just freelancing, and I got a call. Cornerstone was looking for an artistic director. Would I be interested in throwing my hat in the ring? And I had seen a few shows when in LA and other places. Was interested in the work and wasn't looking for a job at all. But I was really intrigued by it. I was actually surprised that Cornerstone was potentially looking for a person outside of its ensemble. I'd never worked with Cornerstone. I'd never worked in a particular way, though I'd done analogous work, I suppose. And I figured, what the hell? So I jumped in the first. They did it fairly deliberately. You had to answer like 7 or 8 questions. I remember it was like essays. So I wrote, like 10 pages of essays and sent that in. And I think they compiled about 80 or 90 people who they had either reached out to or had answered, responded to a call or whatever. And then they asked about 30 or 40 people to write responses. And then they called 8 semifinalists up and had those of us who were from out of town, come in, and we interviewed for a couple hours. And they had a committee that was composed of members of their ensemble, members of the board, members of the staff. I think it was about 8 or 10 people. So I answered about 2 hours of questions. I had dinner with one of their board members afterwards, and there was sort of a series of conversations while I was in town. And then a month later, they let me know I was one of the 3 finalists, and could I come back in town? I said, sure. And so they had set this up. I actually didn't really understand what I was getting into. They'd set it up, so I came to town one day, actually had a meal with Bill. And Bill was not really part of the process, but apparently he had meals with all 3 finalists and gave them his impressions of us. And then so it was in Little Tokyo. Cornerstone's offices are right next to Little Tokyo. So they set up a series of meetings where I met with the staff for 2 hours in a building in Little Tokyo. And I was escorted to Cornerstone, where I met with the ensemble for 2 hours. And then I was escorted to another building in Little Tokyo, where I met with the board for 2 hours. And this was all straight, with no break, which was insane. So it was 6 straight hours of meetings. One of the board members, after about 5 hours of meetings, asked me if I would do an improv. And show them what I would do if we were in really big trouble and I had to inspire them to get money. And I was delirious at that point, so I was like, sure, well. Jumped on the table. And then being Cornerstone, they took about 4 weeks to so about 2 weeks in, I was like, all right, I'm moving on. And I got a call at some point from the firm saying, please, they're still, it was. So once they finally made the offer, I was like, well, now I'm not sure. So I flew back in, had another series of meetings, and finally decided to do it. So it was a real process. Following a founding artistic director is a very particular process. A couple years in, we did a new strategic plan, with the board and company, and we had a consultant come in and just kind of talk to the board about strategic plan. She was not going to facilitate our process, but she was just going to kind of just give us some insight into what that is. One of the things he said to us was with not-for-profits, the person who follows a founder usually lasts on average 9 months. So I've been at Cornerstone 6 years, so I've beaten the odds. But there's a lot that goes into it. And since our company has a very particular culture, I had to sort of learn that culture, make changes, but at the same time really honor people's fears and insecurities about that. Reassure people both by action and word and presence that we were going to be okay and things were going to move forward. So it's a pretty big balancing act, that transition. I would say I really felt for the first 4 years or so of my time that I was still in that transition period. And it really wasn't until we sort of finished our first cycle of plays and that I really felt like I had sort of landed at Cornerstone and it was starting to become my company, our company.
For the three of you that were founders, when you're talking to someone outside of your usual artistic team, be it a director or designer or a collaborator in some way, Mandi earlier said that the team looks for something that's particularly a note show. How do you describe the sensibility or the aesthetic of your company to somebody who's new to the artistic circle?
For us, I get to know a director's work for a long time before we hire them to work with us. And I invite them to be part of our process for a long time before we actually invite them to direct on the main stage.
How do you invite them to be a part of your process before they work with you?
I, as a director, and our process tends to, we like to think that we build our productions in layers. So we have like 3 or 4 designer runs where many things will shift throughout that process. And I'll bring people in from the very first designer run, outsiders from the very beginning. It's just part of our process. I feel like we get a lot from having new people, new eyes in the room. And it also gives me great opportunity to talk about the work and what we're doing and what we're trying to do and how they process the work.
Yeah, it's really a lot of it is about relationships. It's about knowing artists and actors, writers and directors, and establishing those relationships either in Los Angeles, with the talent pool here in LA, but also around the country, and getting to know people's work and over time, and then bringing them into your home and collaborating with them. So it's hard to say. I can't really remember a time when I've had to kind of explain the fountain to someone on the outside. It always just kind of is sort of this natural process of relationship building and making, which is another very important aspect of the job too, is establishing relationships with other artists around the country and in LA as well, and to bring those artists in to your theater and have them create work at your venue. It's a major part of the job as well.
I give them the mission. No. But, well, our mission is interesting because it is kind of an aesthetic mission more than anything else. But yeah, I guess it's similar to what's been said. We try to work with, for instance, designers. We try to work with them as part of the development process as much as possible. It's not always possible. But we try to bring designers in early to sort of work with us, and part of our actual development process is creating space and design elements. So we try to like incorporate those people into the process early. Also, we tend to work with a lot of the same people who tend to share our aesthetic. It's what I find very tricky sometimes is, like everything else, it's not just I'm the director of the piece, I'm going to work with the designer I always work with. I want to work with the designer, because the whole company has to work with the designer. And we usually try to work with designers who create problems for the actors, physical obstacles, not like problems like there's a nail or anything, but like, you know, like there's physical obstacles that the actor has to overcome in order to deal with the set. So it's a very specific people who work that way. And also, you know, the way that Ghost Road works, maybe the way that Cornerstone works, is not for everybody. I mean, it's not for people. Some people just like hate it. And so you have, it's a lot of trial and error. I mean, I have worked with a lot of people who just hated it, you know, and it wasn't a good marriage. And it's just trying to find those relationships that are good marriages. And once you have those, you want to keep going back to those people. So it's, I don't know, it's hard to say how I describe it.
It being Gay Pride Weekend, I want to redefine marriage and sort of expand that to co-productions. For those of you that have co-produced with another company, can you talk about that process and how your role as artistic director played into that?
Well, we're in the middle of a co-production right now at the Fountain Theater with Deaf West Theater, which is actually a company that we helped start at the Fountain Theater back in 1991. We provided an artistic home for Deaf West, and that's how Deaf West was born. So it's particularly gratifying for us now, 22 years later, to still have this relationship with that company. So it's with, for example, Deaf West and the Fountain Theater and the creation of our current production, Cyrano, this new version of Cyrano de Bergerac. It was a real collaboration between our two companies, because now we have not only two theater companies, but we have two cultures. We have two languages, and two communities, two audience bases. And it was particularly rewarding artistically, and in many other ways, creating this project and collaborating with them yet again, and problem solving and how to translate the script, and communication in the rehearsal room with ASL translators, and the director working with deaf actors for the first time, and it was just fascinating and alive and electric and a joy. So that was a very positive experience. Not all co-production experiences are like that, but we're in the middle of a very positive one now.
Others on the co-producing piece?
We've co-produced a little bit, or quite a bit over the years, and we've had a couple of situations or relationships when I've been in Cornerstone. One of the things that's been interesting for us, I think, certainly for me, is the first co-producing relationship we had was early on in my time. It was a project that was already in place when I got to Cornerstone, but we were in a co-production with the Guthrie Theater, and the Guthrie Theater is immense. And budget dwarfs ours, obviously. It's a big floor theater in Minneapolis, for those of you who might not know. And we're relatively small, and so the power dynamic in that is very particular. We were bringing sort of expertise in some of the artists from our ensemble, and they wanted to have this community process. They opened a new building, and they wanted Cornerstone Show to be part of that, and that was something that Bill and Joe Dowling, their artistic director, had sort of concocted together. I was actually not supposed to really have much to do with it. I just come on. I was going to come out and see it, basically, and hang out. Literally 3 months after I joined. But our director of the show, Bill, had a family situation. He had to leave, so I wound up heading out the second day of the rehearsal and wound up being the director through the opening. So I got to experience that dynamic. And it was very interesting. What they meant by community engagement, what we meant by community engagement, were really, really vastly different things. Why we were doing the show and why they were doing the show were really vastly different things. And the power dynamic was different. So it was an interesting negotiation for us and for me. And ultimately a very positive experience in terms of the show, and I think positive for both companies. But I haven't eschewed doing any more co-productions with Lord Theatre since then. I haven't really pursued it. And I have a lot of friends who are artistic directors, those kind of theaters and stuff, and I wasn't necessarily 100% comfortable with it. We're about to do a project in a couple of years with La Jolla, but it's a very particular relationship. But they have commissioned us to do a show, a site-specific show in San Diego. So but still, some of those things come into play, and so that's interesting. And on the flip side, we did a co-production with a company that also sort of came out of our process, a Watts Village Theater Company, in which the roles were somewhat reversed. I mean, it's not the same degree of difference, but Cornerstone was suddenly the bigger theater in that, and Reed raised the bulk of the money, all the money, and so it was a different relationship. And so negotiating that, I found the shoe on the other foot, and found some of the power dynamics also uncomfortable. And that one, and sort of figuring out how to negotiate those conversations was interesting, especially in light of the relationship I'd had before. I was fighting the power, and suddenly I was the power. I was like, oh man, and so it's interesting. And so being really, really aware of those dynamics going in next time is, I think, important.
But because of the economy being what it is and how expensive it is to produce theater now, I think more and more companies are co-producing and linking up and partnering up around the country and sharing production costs and going with this rolling world premiere model
which is great. I mean, one of the what I've heard here is it's really important that both people know what it is you're partnering about and what it is you want out of it. And oftentimes I find we all know that second productions are so important to playwrights,
Right.
for example. And you know, everyone wants the world premiere. They can raise money with that. And then playwrights find that to get a second production is sometimes very difficult. And yet oftentimes anyone who's written a play knows about the time you open your first production is when you kind of get an idea of what it is and what's wrong now.
What's wrong?
I'd love another crack at it.
Right.
And so our most successful have been usually that, when it's been focused around a playwright and a project, and as you say, theater's getting to pool resources, and the artistic result of that is that the playwright gets another crack and gets to refine the script in a second production.
We're also we're also doing partnerships that aren't necessarily co-production, but partnering with organizations that aren't theaters, and that's been a great model for us, and it's been very productive.
For spinning off on that success piece, if each of you could share a story of a sort of particular success as an artistic director that you found during your tenure.
I think of myself, I think of moments. There are just moments that are just burned in my memory that remind me why I do this. Years ago, our Voices workshop, which was an HIV and AIDS playwriting workshop where people with HIV or AIDS were writing plays themselves and performing the work themselves. And the opening night of that, when that piece was first performed, and when the lights came up, the lights went down, and it was over, the audience rushing the stage to grab the actors and embrace them. Many of them had never been in plays before, and it's a memory that I'll just hold with me forever. Being on the floor of the Fountain Theater on the stage with Athol Fugard, with the pages of his play scattered on the floor, both of us with our pencils out, working through the mechanics of a new work. Being in the early days of starting Death West Theater and trying to figure out how are we going to do this? How are we going to make these two languages meld in some kind of a simultaneous theatrical experience? And then 20 years later, sitting at Tavern on the Green, watching them receiving a special Tony Award. I mean, there are moments like that that are, and the people, and it's that audience member who comes up to you and says, what I just saw changed my life. Thank you. And when you see how you can profoundly change someone's life and impact your audiences in a very personal way, to me, that's what I take home, and those are the things that make it worthwhile for me, is the human element, is the human content.
When you asked this question over the phone, I was like, oh, I can't think of anything. A couple of things. Just this past summer, we took a show to the Co Festival in Amherst, and we were asked to do a week-long workshop. And we've never really taught our development process, and so we did this week-long workshop. And who showed up in the room were 15 people ranging the age from 73 to 18. Some of them were educators, some of them were actors, some of them were writers, some of them was a puppeteer. I mean, and some of them had never performed before. And in a week, we took the story of Icarus and created a piece that was performed for the public. And it brought these disparate people all came together and worked together and created this piece, and it was more of a teaching experience, but they all found this value in contemporary understanding, and it really touched their lives as a group, and I thought that was a really exciting thing. And just on a more sort of regular show note, when we did a piece of ours at the Getty, I was just kind of astounded, and I was so happy for the ensemble on stage. As 300 people we didn't know, which sometimes in this town, when you're doing small theater, you know everybody all the time that walks in here. So 300 people we didn't know, were watched the show and talked to us about it, you know, just got it. And I thought, oh, I'm not stupid, you know, I understand drama. But it was, I think that was anything that can raise the morale of a group of people who work so hard to create something that sometimes feels that it's so outside the box that it's not reaching anybody, and you realize it doesn't reach anybody.
I think of small moments too. I mean, we've had, it's hard for me to just pick, but I know we've been lucky to, like, we remounted our production of Jesus Hates Me and Southwest Repertory, which was the beginning of an amazing relationship that we've had with them, so that sticks out. But we took our production of Tommy to the Sega String, which was an even larger theater. We took a production to the Geffen, I'm just sorry, not the Geffen. I'm hoping to. Now I've lost the name of the museum also. The Getty Museum, thank you. And so those stick out, but the other things stick out, like how at the end of the first season in 1999, we were $75,000 in credit card debt. So I really remember 4 years later when we got rid of that, and have never been in credit card debt, any debt since. So you remember things like that. Or the day we recognized, you know, the day I walked in the room and realized I don't know any of the audience members. That was a very kind of interesting day for us. And now because I don't come to every performance now, the day I realized I know all the audience members, but they're all people that I've met because they've come to support the theater, not just my uncle. Stop coming.
He's a subscriber here now. We're glad to have, yeah.
Appreciate it. You know, so
I don't know if I was supposed to tell you.
So I think of moments like that, or we just had this amazing fundraiser where, as an answer to, you know, we have a big gala which we do, but which is, you know, over the last few years has not been raising as much money as we hoped. So we said, okay, we had this thing what we called a friend raiser, which was this Chancey's Award thing, and it was just a way for us to kind of celebrate the artists and celebrate our supporters. We said, well, let's do something different because that actually costs us money, and we created this 24-hour fundraiser where there was a different act for every hour for 24 hours straight. And we had, so we were able to bring in some of these artists that we haven't worked with for a long time, or some artists that we've been wanting to work with, and just, you know, was an opportunity for them. And at the same time, we had supporters who were out getting donations for every hour of theater they sat through. And you know, we thought it was crazy to project that we would make $18,000 off of it. And at the end of the day, we made close to $27,000 with mostly like $10, $20, $30 donations. So it was without tapping into our normal supporters, you know, and I think that was a good feeling all around. And it was more of a friend raiser than many of our other, than the Chances really, because for supporters, for artists and supporters, some of them, we spent 24 hours with them. So we got to spend a lot of time with them. And at the same time, we introduced the theater to a lot of new people, and everyone got to see what I look like 14 hours in, that kind of event. So, you know, so it's all these little things, I think. Michael.
You know, obviously I've got a shorter term, so my history as getting these moments as an artistic director are a little different, but I remember when we, after, you know, much hashing out of this current season and trying to figure out what we were going to do with it, the moment that we were all sitting, you know, in my apartment and kind of talking about all of the plays and what we had and what it looked like, and the conversation kind of spun off into like two different conversations, and at one point, like, a couple of us went outside to have a cigarette, and like, but I realized at that same moment we were all, the conversation split off because we were all so excited about the shows that we had that it just kind of became like a 6-person party, like in my living room, like about us all talking about how we had a season not only of world premieres, but also, you know, the 10th anniversary of Mulholland Christmas Carol that we were going to get to put up. And all of the shows were either written by our own members or people who, in the community, like we just did a play Pedro Duffy's, who's, you know, very close with us, you know, and then this, you know, the next show with Adam Simkowitz, who we've done some shows with, and so everybody, all of these plays were people whose work we cared about and who we felt like we've had a part of their history, and like the realization that we were going to get to do that with these amazing plays, just it was a really kind of just amazing feeling.
It's, I'm like, it is. It's moments. It's what I find as an artistic director is you. When you told me you were going to ask this question, I had a similar thing. I don't have anything to say about this, but I think my greatest rewards are when I assemble great groups who create great things. It's never something I've accomplished. It's the accomplishments of somebody else that I just happen to be lucky enough to be standing there when they did it. And it's because of putting groups together. And that's a lot of what artistic direction is and then getting to watch and feel the satisfaction of helping provide the dream of that thing that everyone gathered for in the first place. But it's moments, and over the years it's little things. I flash on, I direct a production of Superior Donuts here next door, and one Tuesday night we had Big Brothers Big Sisters brought groups to the show, and we had a talk back afterwards, sat on the stage and some of the actors talked, and after the talk back ended, there was a young African American girl and her older sister came up the aisle dying to talk to our actor Eddie Gathegi, and Eddie said, "Sure, I'd love to talk with you." And this little girl just burst into tears. I mean, she opened her mouth and tried 2 or 3 times to say something to this guy who she'd just seen deliver this for herself, and she started crying. Immediately her big sister burst into tears, and it was so great, both for this girl that she found this, and great for the big sister that she was able to provide this for the girl. So we all just kind of stood there and cried because of this moment that was created that girl will always remember, and her big sister who took
What does this mean?
Well, it's not her real sister. It's someone who works in an office.
Is this dog?
It's somebody who works in an office downtown, but decided that night it was more important to her than staying in her city apartment to coming out and taking this girl, who really wasn't her sister, and that she probably didn't know very well at all, to a show, and then to watch the impact of both of them. You know, it's moments like that I think but again, it's more about what I'm able to do. I would tell, one more story, if you would. And it was that we created a production of The Grapes of Wrath in Chicago. And the reason it was such it's kind of the greatest failure. He said, talk about the greatest failure you ever had, and one of the greatest successes. And we wanted so desperately to bring The Grapes of Wrath to the stage. It was something Frank Galati, a member of our ensemble, really wanted to create and direct. And the estate never allowed that. The only Steinbeck that could ever be on stage was Of Mice and Men, because John himself did that adaptation. Steinbeck himself did that. He'd never turned any of his other works into plays, and so the estate was not going to allow The Grapes of Wrath to be done on stage. And Frank had this vision, and powerful vision, a cast of 28 people, and so he wrote a letter to Elaine Steinbeck, the widow of John Steinbeck, his third and much younger wife. And turned out she was the first female stage manager ever in the history of Broadway. So she was very much into theater at the time. And Frank wrote this love letter to her about The Grapes of Wrath and why it should be done on stage and why that was important. And Elaine jumped in. She said, great. She was on board. We gathered. It was 5 or 6 of the hardest weeks we'd ever had. The set fought us the whole way. The truck wouldn't run. Everything. The final preview or actually the night before our final preview was when we had our breakthrough on the script, because we realized we had 4.5 hour show and 2 audiences coming the next night and didn't have enough time to do that. So that's why Frank had to cut 40 pages of the script, and why the script kind of took a turn. But my long artistic director story is that we opened that show and it was pretty much devastated by the reviews. The critics pretty much killed it in the crib. Critics can do that, you know. And it was so hard for Frank and for all these people. It worked so hard. So we gathered the morning after this thing was, you know, the two main critics in Chicago had panned it, and we put together a plan that we needed 2 things. We needed a partner who had money that could help us rehearse, rewrite, rework the show. That's that second production thing that I talked about. And then we needed a better set of reviews, because our goal, the goal was to get into New York. We knew we had something that if we could get this thing to New York, it would be a great event. So we needed both of those things. We found the La Jolla Playhouse. Des McAnuff had a slot in his season next year. And oftentimes artistic directors are that way. They're out there with, they've got a fifth of their budget dedicated to do something, and they don't know what. So we convinced him. That became the re-rehearsal, rewrite. And we found an international theater festival in London that would allow 10 performances only at the National Theater. And we flew to London, convinced the person who worked that festival to come in and see one of our shows before it closed. They picked us for this festival. We built a set there and a set in La Jolla, and we literally took our 30-person cast to La Jolla, and they rehearsed, reworked the show, flew the entire company to London. 3 days later, we opened at the National for 10 performances only, but we got the reviews we needed to get into New York next season, and in 1990 picked up the Tony Award for Best Play for The Grapes of Wrath. But again, that's where an artistic director, it was dead. It was dead in the crib. And mustering anything or any resources you can to help these people that have worked so hard finish their dream is kind of the best description of what I think an artistic director can try to do.
I'm going to toss one more question to you guys, and then I'm going to open up for Q&A, so if you want to begin to think of some questions. But on that idea of sort of failures or challenges, or a question from our online audience, what do you do, or what would you wish you could do when you have a show about to open that doesn't really work? So either a failure that you've been through, or this specific example, and I'll open it to a few of you to answer that.
Everything you can to make it work. I mean, we certainly, we had a show recently, not so recently I guess now, but we had a show though. It was getting to, I mean, a week before opening, and we were all like, what is going to happen? Oh my gosh. And you know, everybody kind of dove in, and you know, we had AMC members building props for the show that weren't done, and you know, were really like integral, and people, you know, just everybody kind of just jumped in. We you know, everybody possible from the company that, you know, could get involved and like help out with whatever actors were having problems, and I think, I mean, it was exhausting, and it was really hard, and the show ended up being great, and it ended up getting all these great reviews, and you know, award nominations, and like all these things, and the company, you know, knew that there was, obviously they were aware of a lot of the stress, but I don't think they were ever quite fully aware. I mean, like the cast and everybody knew, but like nobody was. We were able to really contain the situation, and turn out what ended up being just a beautiful show. So I think our biggest challenge specifically at Note as the AMC is that we don't have like a, you know, managing director or production manager. We take that on as well, and it's sometimes really difficult to wear that many hats, you know, because we're a liaison on each show. You know, we've got one of us assigned to each show to kind of watch it, and sometimes, you know, things just kind of get out of whack, and like, so it's something that I know we all would love to be able to kind of have that position, but we're not quite there to be able to put that in there. So right now it's all of us, all hands on deck kind of thing. So
I think as an ensemble, I mean, one of the things that we can do is we can just pull together and do what it takes, right? That means people just take off of work you know, whatever they have to do to just work all day, 24 hours if you have to try to get it up and ready to go. And then we've also have pushed opening nights back. And you just said, you know, I know we're going to lose money on this, but that's sort of less important than making sure that what we put up is something we're proud of. Because we have to always remember, like, especially the artists, the performers, they have to perform it every night. You know, the rep. So we have to make sure that we've helped them help to be part of something they could every day come in and feel good about.
Yeah, we have a saying at the Fountain Theater about the art ruling the calendar and the calendar not ruling the art. And we've had to delay openings. We have the luxury of being able to do that because we changed our entire scheduling. We no longer do blocks, set, you know, show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and set shows and slots. We threw out that model years ago, and we're entirely on a flex plan and a flexible season. So we're able to be a little more modular that way. But we've always believed at the Fountain that if it's not ready, we don't open it. We've had some close calls. It's a tough decision to make. With hindsight, maybe not always the right decision has been made. And there have been some times too in the past where, over 22 years, where I've had to replace a director or an actor. You watch a run through and you realize it's not happening. The magic is not happening. Usually the actors know it. Usually the actors know it long before anybody else does.
They like to know too.
And they'll let you know. But part of being the artistic leader of a company is, and to be part of that team, is to have the courage to say, you know what, it's not working. And protect the family. Yeah. And either you delay or you cancel and regroup. And it's hard. But if you want this job, you have to be able to do that, and it's part of the job.
I'll talk about a failure. That was a failure in leadership. And it was many years ago, and I was, trying to figure out how do you lead an ensemble when you're trying to reach decisions by consensus. So I had this idea. I would gather the most talented actors, theater artists that I knew in a group and create a piece with no leader. And see what happened. It's awful. But there was the most brilliant ideas and a giant fight for ownership. And I learned the value of being a benign dictator, and that somebody has to take responsibility. It was an experiment.
How did you know when it was time to go home?
We didn't.
No way.
But it was a lesson, and it almost killed me, and I almost threw my hands into the company. It was really like, are we going to move forward after this? People got out of that guard. Everyone entered it with totally good intentions, but it was naive on my part to think that could work, because no matter how much consensus you want to achieve, it's rare that you can ever get there, especially when you have a lot of really creative egos in the room, and not everybody can be. It's good when not everyone's brilliant. I'm just telling you. I mean, there are like brilliant people, and then there are people that are amazing support systems. And so that was my failure. I will not mention the title nor any names. All right.
Cool. With that, maybe I'll open up for questions. Go here for my left. So we'll go here, there. So you first.
Hello, I'm Malik Alameen. I'm with the newly formed Rio Theater of the West Valley.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Brave man.
There we go. So my question is really personal in terms of artistic directors. That's the role that I'm assuming with our company. It's a two-parter. So you can pick which one you want to answer. The first part, and it's all got to do with how do you account for taste? Either when you're directing or when you're in a position to select a season or to say no to a play, how do you account for taste in terms of not just trusting your own taste or to figure out, I think I have this great idea, and then is it really such a great idea? That's the first part. The second part is what you mentioned about your role to make sure that you put the best quality stuff on stage.
Right.
So when you have to get rid of a director,
Yeah.
how close do you stay to the show so that you'll know if you need to do that? And how do you balance that with not having the director feeling like you're over their shoulder every second? So kind of two parts, but choose your own adventure, answer which one you like.
Please.
I mean, ultimately, I think both directing and, I would say both directing and artistic directing, really, when you ask somebody what a director does or what an artistic director actually does, you make decisions. And that is fundamentally the job. You're the person who makes decisions. So as artistic director, you may have many brilliant ideas, you may have none. Ideas are kind of a dime a dozen. And you make decisions about which ideas you're actually going to do. Every cue on stage, every single thing that happens on stage represents a decision. Whether somebody else makes it and you decide not to mess with it, that's a decision. Or whether you actually do something to make it happen, right? And artistic directing is the same thing. You're getting input from everybody, and you make a series of decisions. So bottom line is you actually have to trust yourself. Whether you're running an ensemble, whether it's a group process, whether it's a singular vision, whatever, you're making decisions constantly, and you have to trust them. You have to be gutsy enough to admit you're wrong and make a different decision and change the decision. But even that has to be, you have to be decisive about it. You have to make a decision. And things like firing people and stuff, or monitoring the process, it's your gut. You trust the process and you give it space. You don't, you come in, sometimes you're wrong, but you have to be on it. The artistic director-director relationship is not always a fun one. And you have to just be willing to be the person not liked. I'm often the person not liked.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, and so sometimes the director doesn't like it, and yet you want people to feel safe, and you want to create a really positive atmosphere, and so you're sort of balancing that, right? Like, when do I, is my interference going to get in the way of that or not, or is it going to rescue that or salvage it if possible? And I get it, it's your gut and its decisions.
I think you also have to be clear on what you're protecting. Are you protecting the audience? Are you protecting the artists? Are you protecting who are you trying to take care of? And I think you constantly have to ask yourself that question. I think the priority is different for different aesthetics and different companies. But I think you have to always ask yourself, who am I taking care of? And I think that sometimes helps the decision. And it's different sometimes for different projects, depending on what you're doing.
I was just going to say, as far as taste goes, I think you just need to trust your own instinct. And I think when you start to think about, will they like it, or this will satisfy their taste, meaning your audience, whatever that is to you, then I think you get into trouble. If you start thinking about, this will be a hit, or then it usually never is. Or they'll think this is funny, and it usually never is. And that's been our experience too. And I think the most successful projects for us have always been the ones that come from the heart, that come from that burning need inside you that we've got to do this play. And it's not an exact science. None of this is an exact science. A lot of it is instinct and what you feel. Because an audience can feel that. It's such a visceral, immediate thing that if you start getting too much in your head about it, it can lead you astray. As far as serving audiences are concerned, that's a different story. You might look at a season and think, we need to do a piece that satisfies this audience. You want to stay diverse and do that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just going from the heart and going from your soul. That's why you have this job. So I would just say, trust that, and you'll be better served. And then, if it doesn't work, then you can say, all right, they didn't get it, but I did that, and it was important to me, and I felt it was important.
Because if you're passionate about it, every decision you make is going to have that passion behind it. You're saying, I want this director to do it because I know they're going to take care of this the way I want it to be taken care of. Or, you're looking at everything through the lenses of, this is something that I want to be the best that it can be, and not have any particular outcome. Like this is going to serve me on the back end. It's really that process and that love you've gotta look at it with.
I was just say, I was like you, right? Like, you just kind of learn on the job. You make lots of mistakes, which I've made so many mistakes, right? But the only thing I would say is, like, find some mentors, find people who are outside of your world, who you can really who you can turn to and have those kinds of conversations with, that they have nothing at stake, right? And then as far as working with directors, I mean, I had to learn that you make sure that you're not hiring a director to do your vision of a show, right? And that's something you learn, and recognize that there are places and times for these conversations, whether it's after a designer run through or before you hire them when you're talking about the play. Make sure that you know those places and times, and know that it's your job to talk about what's happening on stage and not about them or about you.
And be sure that you know going in that you and the director are telling the same story, that you're all on the same page about what the play is and what is the story being told, and you share the same artistic vision, because it's not just that your theater is presenting this director's version of this play, it's also your theater's production of this play. So you have to be in sync that way, or else, and so you're not surprised if you come to a final dress rehearsal and the play is not at all what you expected it to be. The fault is yours.
Yeah, sure. I would say in terms of process companies too, sometimes it's about being on the same page with what the vision for the process is. Why you're entering in the process, and what your ideals are and what you're holding strong to in terms of vision of how process happens. It's the same sort of conversation when you don't have the actual play.
Yeah. Great. I'm going to take it to the gentleman in the back. Next question.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for your wonderful, charming stories.
Oh, you're welcome.
But since you're all actors and directors and ultimately artistic directors, can I ask you what your experiences have been with actors' equity? The pros and cons of your experience with contracts and so on, if you would.
I'm going to say that that's off topic for artistic directors. That seems like more of an administrative conversation.
Oh, they wouldn't be involved with that at all?
I'll let the panelists speak for themselves, but to me it feels a little off topic for today's conversation.
I've dealt more with equity as a producer than as an artistic director. Equity specifically, and even as a producer, I've had wonderful experiences with equity. But
yeah, from my point of view, as a Lord Theater here, we're one of the larger theaters, and so our equity relationship is very clearly spelled out, in our contract with equity, and so from our point of view, as I say, it's our relationship is pretty clearly defined. I myself have been as you say, I'm an actor. I've been a member of the union myself for many years, and find that the systems that they have in place work well for us, and so generally the relationships have been good. I don't want to just stray too far off topic, but there's unique circumstance here in Los Angeles with the relationship with Actors Equity and the 99
That's
seat
why
theaters
I'm asking the question.
and all of that, but I don't know how much
And I would say there's a concurrent dialogue happening to that in the community, and so if you want to pursue that, contact me or anyone from the LA Stage Line staff. We're happy to put you in touch with that dialogue. So it's just kind of a parallel thread to this. So I'm going to jump to the next question, which I think was here.
My question is for Randy. You talked a lot tonight about different factors that go into choosing a play, deciding what you want to produce. And Els and I have been subscribers here since you first came as artistic director. Of all the productions, that we've loved seeing. I'm very curious about the specifics of why you chose to do Arthur Miller's All My Sons, which we loved. And surprisingly, I had never seen before. But can you just tell us, was it a particular director? Or?
Actually, if I can repeat the question for the online viewer, the question was, what specific factors contributed to the Geffen deciding to do Arthur Miller's All My Sons?
Thank you, Jimmy, for the question. That was a show that I directed, and so I tend, as you probably heard in my answers earlier, I grew up in the theater as an actor, and I was part of an actors company in Chicago, and I find that a lot of the work that I am particularly drawn to is generally actor-driven material, good ensemble-driven material, and I find that's the things that I'm drawn to, and I kind of enter plays oftentimes that way. I just loved that play. I hadn't read it in a long time. When I reread it, I was knocked out by how it resonated at the time. It was we were deep into Iraq, and you know, the play is about the war machine and the profit motive in war, and we were all talking at the time about Halliburton and all of those kinds of things. So it resonated really well at the time. It was very actor-driven, and I had 2 or 3 friends of mine who were really good actors who had talked about being interested in working on that at some point. And I'm sure it probably lined up, Jimmy, also with what other pieces of the puzzle we had in place at that time, and it happened to be a classic and just what we needed. You know, who knows all of those things? But I think initially it was driven by it's just such a wonderful piece of writing and such red meat for actors, and I think that's how I ended it.
Go ahead. Maybe jump in the second row.
This is a question from Mike. My name is Charlie Mallett with Theater West, and I produce there, and I'm looking for new models all the time, new financial models. And you mentioned a partnering model with a company that is not a theater company. I was wondering if that was intriguing to me. I was wondering if you could expand on it.
So the question is talking about partnerships with non-theater companies in that production model.
So an example recently for us was when we work with a community, we tend to look for partnerships that are not financial in any way, but partnerships that help us gain entree into the community, provide advice for us, sometimes space, things like that. And so, you know, that's just very typical of our process. So we do that almost every time out. So recently we did a piece, very recently, that was done in partnership with the Homeboy Industries and Homecore Cafe. They were sort of our partner organizations doing outreach to the community and stuff. And so in that partnership, as the play developed and whatnot, we got to know those folks there. We realized that we had sort of an opportunity to have sort of a deeper engagement both with the organization and with the community that had to do with their mission. Because their mission is about giving jobs to people. It's bullets, not jobs, is their mission. And so and you know, and members of the community were going to be doing our play. Usually we give people stipends. It's not a handsome stipend, but it's something. And so I started having conversations with folks there. We talked to Father Greg Boyle and other people there and said, is there any way that we can meet halfway and really partner to make doing this play the actual people's jobs, like really pay them a salary, get them on insurance, the whole thing. And we talked about it, and since it was very aligned with their mission and our mission, they said yes, and so they took a financial leap. You know, that was a big commitment on their part, and we did. We kind of we sort of both took a step towards each other, which meant, you know, more investment on both of our parts, and it was a really successful way to work together to really solidify a relationship with the folks in the play, to honor the mission of our community partner and things like that, and to really up the ante on some of the stuff we were able to do and ask of our community members in terms of making the play. So I'm often what I'm looking for when we're working in our context is, you know, there are these other interested organizations. Is anything we're doing aligned with their mission in such a way that they might want to invest or co-invest with us in the process? And we've done that a couple times, and that was one example.
Okay, this is going to be our last question.
Sure. My name is Joanne. I'm with Color and Light Theater Ensemble, and I wanted to ask, many of you guys came from outside California. What have you found unique about the LA or Southern California theater audiences, and how have you kind of catered your artistic work to match that?
So the question is, what have you found unique about the Southern California audiences, and how has the work been catered to those audiences?
I mean, I've done more theater in smaller cities, so for me, it's almost a challenge to kind of grab, because there's so much good theater in Los Angeles, and I think that's something that gets overlooked by a lot of people that aren't, they kind of see LA as some weird artistic theater desert, when there's, I think, more great theater here than most cities. But so for me, it's that challenge of there is so many great things to see. How do you stand out and are different and offer something that is different than the other companies, that are doing great work? And how can you complement and maybe work together off of what they've been doing, but how can you kind of make your own way in this city?
I think a challenge is geography.
Yeah.
So, and if you could, and whether that's and parking, whether whatever, and whether that's, I think you have to speak to a community, and there is the community of Los Angeles in general, but I think you have to figure out who is your community as a company. Is your community a geographical community? Is it, who are those people? And it doesn't mean that people won't come from far away, but they have to come from far away because they feel like they're part of your world. And I think that there's that challenge, that geographical challenge, more than I think much anywhere else.
That's right. If there were further questions, please email us at info@lastagewines.com or tweet them, and we'll share them with the panelists, and we'll post the responses on lastagetimes.com. But in our final moments, I'd love to hear from each of you a few words of your one wish for LA theater. Oanh, you can go first.
Oh. Always
Michael, let's talk about this.
Or anyone.
Yeah.
Wasn't a surprise question. You all heard this last week.
I wasn't listening.
I would say pride. Pride in what we do. So much we feel the stepchild to the film and television industry here in Los Angeles, and often we can easily fall into the trap of feeling second fiddle to another coast, perhaps. And I would just say my biggest wish is to feel pride in what we do.
I would say, and this is one of our goals to be one of them, but just more theaters paying artists enough money that they can actually live on. So that an artist could actually live in LA and make a living through the theater. I just wanted to know, I got applause for that.
That puts the pressure on the rest of us.
I mean, he called me out.
I guess my one wish comes back to that geography question, and also comes back to, I think, what LA's Stage Lines does. And Cornerstone recently did a show, and often we do it in site-specific places and stuff, but we did a show in the theater, and it was at the Los Angeles Theater Center. And there's a sort of wonderful thing that happens in LA when 4 theaters are going, and these incredible diversity of audiences are coming in. And people would see other shows or our show and then go see other shows, and it was really exciting. And it had this locus, right? And so I would love to see more locuses, more places where we just build off each other, feed off each other, because it was so exciting. I saw all the other shows, and my cast, all the cast would see it. It was this energy that built that really served our show, and I think served the other shows so well. It was really, really exciting, and I would love us to find more locus points that we can just feed off each other. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I had that was kind of my similar thing. For as much as I feel like everybody that does theater and is really anchored in theater in Los Angeles does have a community, I think we're all working so hard in our own little kind of silos that it's sometimes I think there's a lot of opportunities to kind of have those moments that cross like with each other, and that we could work kind of together and find more things that are, I don't know, whether they're opportunities of co-production or mere location, you know, more ways that I think we can help each other, and I don't know what they are, but I would love to see more of a kind of, you know, universal sort of hand in that.
I wish for every theater company or show or director to walk into their theater night after night and see a full house of people they don't know.
Yes, and I really have nothing to add. This is all so true. I've been in the theater in Los Angeles for a dozen years or so now, and it is palpable to me that the growing, organic reaching for this community that we're all talking about, that is, and there is so much more. I know that I'm talking to the choir, but there is so much more exciting, creative work going on in Los Angeles than any other city in America. Certainly New York City. They're more and more, they are becoming a showcase for the best of what's happening everywhere else. And there is no place I find more dynamic than what is going here. And so I would just echo the wishes of everybody here, the continued hard work. I said to Steve earlier, my God, we don't get to see each other enough. And that's, it echoes your desire for a sense of community. And we are challenged geographically. There's something in New York about bumping into each other on the subway, and that eventually, through osmosis, everyone knows what's going on in theater. And somehow here, that's more difficult. We have to work a little bit harder at finding each other and telling others about each other. But the more that's happening, and that is truly going to raise, you know, that is going to raise us all. I mean, everyone working as hard as we do and doing such creative work. I've often said, you know, somebody once asked me when the Kirk Douglas opened in Culver City, isn't that scary to the Geffen? And on the contrary, if a new young couple moves into Culver City and finds a great show at the Kirk Douglas, they'll find us here eventually, next time, or whatever. If they come to any one of your theaters and get turned on, they'll find us too. And so the more of that is going on the ground, and it's amazingly courageous in this town because of the shadow of the film and television industry. What these theaters are doing all over this city is really courageous, and the stick-to-itness is inspiring. And as Steve said, finally, it's just pride in all of that, and knowing that this is the first city of theater.
And to that point, it's my one wish that we continue the conversation. Thank you for sticking with us tonight. Evaluations and hand them to Crystal Diaz.